One race from the same place that make the same trip on the same ship. So we must push one common intention. It's for a better life in the region for we woman and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean and the Caribbean and the Caribbean.
I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Now in the vision I saw an old man slowly playing a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. And then he called me, he said, Dana, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land with endless bounty and riches beyond compare. Now there was enough for everybody to meet the material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me my people, they was all overpowered with greed. Oh, and the old man played the drum. The old man played the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them of the road to come. And if you hear it, boom, bam, bam. Revelation time. This is revelation. My revelation. Warn them of the word. He start to walk. Walk. Warn them of the road to come. Leaders was fighting leaders. There was tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live loving together, now hatred filling their heart. Neighbor was cussing neighbor, whole villages in mayhem. I hear they wasn't listening to deceitful leaders who preaching false doctrine to them. Compassion gone out the window, deviousness reigned instead. Morality was reading low, cause my people, they were spiritually dead. Oh, and the old man, he played drum. I said, the old man, he played the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them of the road to come. And if you hear it, man, revelation. Oh, this is revelation. Revelation, warn them of the road. And then we take a little walk now. Warn them of the road to come. And then he said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that the old man said the drum. And if you hear it, come by revelation. Oh, this is revelation. Born them on the road to come. I'm born. Born them on the road to come.
Adamo!
I lay down in meditation. I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Now in the vision I saw an old man slowly playing a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. And he called me, he said, Dana, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty and riches beyond compare. But there was enough for everybody to meet their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me my people, they were all overpowered with greed. Oh, and the old man, oh yes, the old man, oh yes. Take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them on the road. And if you hear him, remember the revelation time. This the revelation. The revelation, whatever the road. And then he said, go tell it on the mountain over there. And everywhere. Oh, that the old man be. Oh, one more walk. Oh, one more time.
Oh, yes. Lady Adana. Lady Adana. The old man beat the drum. The vision. The vision. I played it special request by those of you who messaged me to say Dr. Hines play that song before every program because Lady Adana is singing there about Guyana, a country with bountiful riches, where everyone can get a share. But the country is overcome by greed. And the old man beat each drum. He said, take the message to your people. That's what we're doing here. We are taking the message to our people, you, our people, that we have enough in Guyana for all of us. All of us. All of us. The old man beat it drum. A song, a calypso made popular by the late Singing Sandra. And a wonderful rendition there by Lady Adana. One of the voices in calypso that is not given as much play as she should, but she's a tremendous singer, tremendous performer. And of course, you all hear the little Shango, Orisha, the comfort in there. And so you all young people, when you all dancing the dance hall and you all doing it like this, you all know where it come from. You all know where it come from. Warn them of the rod to come. You all think it's road she's saying? Warn them of the rod to come. If they don't share the riches, the windfall that we have now, we are on a mission. Our Open Word edition tonight on a Wednesday night. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you who are joining us. You're joining us from the United States of America, where you all are still trying to digest what happened last Tuesday. But, you know, I told my students in class, I told them it's their generation got to answer what happened on Tuesday. Their generation of scholars for the next 20 years will 30 years we'll have to figure out what happened in America there. Welcome to all of you who are joining us from the United States of America, from Canada, from our wider Caribbean, our Caribbean. We're not giving up on the Caribbean. We're not giving up on the Caribbean. They've been asking me whether I think that we should get out of CARICOM and get out. No, 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 no. No, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. To all of you who are in countries in the Caribbean, welcome. Those of you in Antigua and Barbuda, and I know quite a few of you are there in Antigua and Barbuda. Welcome. Welcome to those of you in St. Kitts, Nevis. Welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. Those of you who are in Barbados. You know, whenever I travel the Caribbean, people can't figure out where I'm from. And the first thing they ask if I'm from Barbados. And we think that our accent is so far apart from the Barbadian accent, but to the outside ears, they don't think it is. It says something about the dynamics of our Caribbean. We not giving up on the Caribbean, especially with this windfall. We have to think ahead. The old man beat the drum. Revelation time. Tonight we are going to be talking about a range of issues. My guests are Professor Clive Thomas, who we've been working overtime in recent days, and Dr. Dennis Canterbury. Professor Thomas, of course, needs no introduction. Dr. Canterbury is the chairperson of the WPA's Policy Committee, and they've been hard at work trying to get our manifesto ready because we're moving on and we're moving forward in this time. We are moving on and we are moving forward. We have something to contribute, and whether in government or out of government, we are going to make our contribution. Whether they like it or not, they're arguing over authorship. We don't argue over authorship. Who authored this and who authored that. The fact is that cash transfers, cash grant, whatever they call it, the idea of using part of our windfall, our oil money, to deal with the perennial problem of poverty was first put on the agenda by Professor Clive Thomas on behalf of the Working People's Alliance. And as Professor Thomas said last week, it wasn't no just come thing because he's been dealing with the question of poverty for a long time. So whether they want to argue about authorship and so on, they can argue till the cows come home. The fact of the matter is that the cash transfer, the idea of cash transfer, is the most popular policy intervention in recent times. You know, they're doing all kinds of polls, you know. A guy called me the other day, you know, to say, well, you know, last month the WPA was doing, I think, 3.7% or 3.6% or something like that. And he called to tell me, well, we are doing now 5.7%. That the WPA itself has a 51% name recognition, that the WPA's presidential candidate has a 77% name recognition, but cash transfer has 100% name recognition. 100%. Right? The cash transfer more popular than the party that put it forward and more popular than the presidential candidate of the party. You know when you're doing something right. We are pressing forward because the old man beat the drum and said to us, go tell it on the mountains. Go to your people and hum this melody to them. Poverty must end. Poverty must end. Poverty must end. Only when you end poverty, better will come. Thank you all very much for showing the confidence and the faith in us. You know, one of the things about progressives and left-wing people is that we kind of shy to beat my own drum. You know, it's a thing, but we're overcoming it slowly. Because if we don't beat the drum, Nobody will beat it for us. I think we're ready to roll. You all have had enough of me. You all have had enough of me. I want to thank a couple of people who have sent in their donations, their monthly donations. You all slack up. But I understand that you all come big during the emancipation. And so you all forget your little thing. But thank those who have sent in their little donations, and the rest of you will follow suit. But we're moving forward in this time, and we're moving forward with a purpose. If poverty can be wiped from the face of Guyana, I can cock up my foot, and as my auntie used to say when she done eat and she belch, she said, God, you can take me now. And when poverty is wiped from the face of Guyana, we on this side of the aisle can say, well done, humble soldier, well done. All right, let's roll now. Professor Clive Thomas, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, David.
I am sorry to preach from the Revelation tonight, but I think it's apt for our discussion. With the old man beat the drum and say we live in a land of plenty. That everyone, if we stop listening to false prophets, everyone can share in the bounty. But most importantly is that neighbors must stop cussing neighbors. People must live together, and we must govern our country together. Professor Clive Thomas, is the old man wrong?
Definitely not. I'm not saying that because I'm old. But he's very right. And I think that what you've said makes it imperative as we see the problem as a growing problem. Poverty expands when you don't directly address it. And therefore, I think what we need to do is to build some momentum for searching for means and mechanisms by which we can extenuate the circumstances of severe poverty for all sections of the population that might be possible. And part of the proposal that WP had put forward was that children who make children, because the government has emphasized payments based on ability to vote, being over 18, and therefore having an ID card and eligible to vote. They've ignored those between 18 and I would go as low as 14 who might be having children and therefore left in the dark to help themselves. Now, every study around the world that has been conducted into family structures find that this is probably one of the most vulnerable sections of any community, children who make children, because they've not grown up to the age where they can be assured of working. They've not grown up to an age where they can be assured of continued access to work and to incomes and therefore to build a family. So you have to make special efforts to cater for that group, children who have children. And we, for cultural reasons, have sections of the population, which some people tell me by culture, tend to move towards having younger marriages or younger family relations involving children than is typical of other countries in the region and in the wider world. I think, therefore, rather than giving it to every citizen, and therefore including in this choice persons who live overseas, who've already lived part of their lives in Ghana, but have been able to migrate to warmer climes or to colder climes but certainly better opportunities for making a living, that these people should not be put in the same status as a child who has a child living in Guyana, or a child who has children living in Guyana. That I prefer the money is paid to young people with children who are under the age of 18. And therefore, in that circumstance, I think more deserving of assistance that could be linked to poverty payment than anybody living overseas. That's my conviction. I don't know if everybody shares it, but that is what I would argue for.
Dr. Dennis Canterbury,
And
you have heard the old story of the old man. Is the old man wrong?
certainly not. And CY is definitely not wrong, because though he says he's not referring to himself, but we're referring to both, in this case, is both the old man in the song, and as well as the CY, because when we look at the work he did in 1993, he did a work called The State of Poverty and Poverty Studies in Guyana. That's the title of the work. And this is what he said then. This paper provides a summary of a large baseline report prepared at the request of ECLAC, United Nations for Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, on the state of poverty and poverty studies in Guyana. It also includes recommendations designed to raise an agenda for poverty alleviation actions as part of a broader agenda for social reform. So the question of poverty in Guyana and us in the WPA is not something that is new in terms of the call in the Buxton proposal for a universal basic income. The concern with poverty, as CY had pointed out last week or sometime before, is a lifelong concern. And as you were saying, David, when poverty is eradicated, then you could say, yes, you're fulfilled. So this is a long struggle that we're having. And the notion of this younger adolescents making children, which we seem to want to overlook, this is a sore problem, because we know for a fact that there is a statistic in the Guyana Human Capital Index for 2020, which says that the adolescent fertility rate was 73 births per 1,000 women in 2018 between the ages of 15 to 19. So we do have that.
Repeat that statistic.
It says 73 births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 19. So that's a sizable number. So you can't leave that number out of the calculations for any sort of poverty rewards. But if it goes to the family, then those people would be included, because we can define the family in many ways to include single parent family, blended families, and other forms of families that we might use as a means to determine the household for making these payments, rather than have a type of payment that would exclude such a statistic.
But Dennis, I want to take you back, and pardon me for doing that, because that statistic that you quoted there needs to sink in. You're talking about almost 1 out of 10 births fall into this demographic that we're talking about. Almost.
15 to 19, yeah.
Yeah, almost 1 out of 10. That's sizable. So you're really saying almost 1 in 10 households. If we follow the logic there, the numbers, it may be less, it may be more, but it says approximately 1 in 10 households really show the characteristic that we're talking about. Teenage parents and so on. It is very significant. And what year are you quoting there from?
This was in 2018, not very long ago. So
not very long ago.
You don't expect that
was,
statistic to really
Yeah. It may have increased since then. It may have increased since then.
It won't increase dramatically.
Go ahead, Sibali.
It won't increase dramatically
Uh-huh.
because the natural figure coming out of the growth of the population. So you shouldn't expect large increases in numbers.
Right.
The rate will be broadly stable.
Yeah. But
the
where
rate
it is
will definitely increase.
Mm-hmm.
He said 73 from in every 1,000.
Yes.
So it's 3 knots before 73.
Right.
So it's like 0.07.
Right. I rounded it off to 1.0, right? But 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, it's still a significant
number, yeah.
Huh?
It's a significant number in a small population.
In a small population. That's the point. That's the point there. And I think that
and we have about 210 to 220,000 households. So you're talking about a lot of people.
Yes. We're talking about
a manageable group, I would imagine.
So you are talking there about somewhere between 20 and, if we go by the statistics, we're talking about somewhere between 20 and 25,000 households. If we go by the statistics there, and that's significant in a small population. Dr. Canterbury, sorry to cut in, but some points we need to emphasize. Because one of the things Jagdio and others are trying to say is that we come up with these things off the top of our head, and we in the WPA know if it's one thing Clive Thomas always tells us, don't talk off the top of your head. You know what I mean? Always have your statistic and other evidence to support what you are saying. Continue, my brother.
And this, to reinforce what you're saying, David, this is the Guyana Human Capital Index for 2020. So this is like the latest data they could actually muster on this issue, coming from the World Bank. So, but then the other dimension is that this statistic has to be considered against the fact that we're reporting on so much a high level of economic growth in Guyana. They said Guyana is experiencing the highest growth level in the world because of the oil moving from one of the lowest growth levels in economic growth to one of the highest in the world. But then at the same time, it puts us where in an income category that is high income. So Guyana is classified as a high income country. So where are these people in this statistic we're talking about? Now they don't fall anywhere near to that $60,000 to $18,000, which is for a high income country per annum. But what we know for a fact is that these people are sort of outside of that number, and this reinforcing the need for a universal basic income. For example, I remember years ago listening to George Lamming giving a talk at the Walter Rodney conference he had in Binghamton in upstate New York. And he looked at this number called the per capita income. And he said, well, what is the per capita income of the man living in the subway in New York? But yet that man is counted in the per capita income. So these kids, these adolescents who are making babies, they're counted in the per capita income. But
they're counted in the per capita income. And
but we know that they're not in it.
Right, they're not in it. And we are saying that we are, the WPA, we are going to fight for those people to be counted and to benefit more than any other demographic, perhaps. And this is the point Clive Thomas was making last week and continues to make. If we're talking about vulnerability, they are perhaps the most vulnerable. This group that they probably run to, 20,000 households or more. And we are saying we are going to fight for the inclusion of those people, those young people, because they are the future and they are being left out. And we are going to fight for them. We want to make it very clear here that when we talk about the distribution of our resources, we're not talking about excluding anybody. We're talking about inclusion. That is why our proposal, the Buxton proposal, as a universal gaze, people talk about targeted transfers, target this community, target that community. Rich people don't need it. We are saying in order to target the most vulnerable, you target everybody so that nobody is left out. That these young people and their children are not left out. That is the point we want to make here. That is why we don't go the way of saying you target this group. And yes, we are targeting. We are targeting vulnerable groups. But in order to target vulnerable groups, we include everybody so that nobody is left out. And of course, the economists will tell us that the rich people who don't need the transfer, the taxes and so on will take care of that. But we are talking about inclusion. If you're targeting 18 years and over, you're targeting one section, voters, and you're excluding young people with families who are not voters. Or you'll hear me tonight, what I'm saying here. Because it's you all got to go and spread this message. So we want that we got to be done with it. So when people come to you all with nonsense, you all will be able to answer them. Professor Clive Thomas, you made a point last week, and you made it this week at the WPA press conference, that economics is not fast food. Economic development is not an instant feel-good thing. That in order to measure economic change in its most profound way, sometimes it takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And this business of linking economic development to the life of a party that is in government for 5 years is really nonsensical. And that we have to see economic growth in larger terms, in an all-party and national perspective, so that if we have a developmental trajectory that all parties subscribe to, when a party loses and goes out of government and the new party comes in, that new party will have an incentive to continue and not will come, because they would have been part of the economic trajectory, the policy trajectory of the outgoing party. Please, Professor Thomas, share with us your wisdom on that very important aspect of economic development.
It's so important that I believe that we might need to discuss that next week, because it's not something that can be addressed in a few minutes. I see we spent nearly an hour on this, but I would make the further point for the discussion that we're having now, that it really pains me, and it speaks something to the quality of a government, of a political party, that a sensible idea can come up and they refuse to acknowledge it, refuse to take it into account. Nothing would please me more than if, after all these years, the government just gracefully say, they got an idea, so let's try and target this group because they really need it, rather than make it an area of political contention and starve or spike the people who might get a benefit just to make a political point against us. I think that's an abominable state of affairs. And I wish that we could put that in some way for the nation to bear in mind. So we develop a type of governance that is not self-seeking and self-gratifying only, that has broader national purpose and intent behind it. Because nothing would be lost from what the original proposal was of $2,000 per household. Nothing would be lost by adding these vulnerable youth to the program of giving $100,000 each of the parents that are alive, as long as they're under 18.
Professor Clive Thomas there emphasizing that it is very important for there to be continuity when we are talking about economic development. This business about parties coming in and talking about their manifesto and governing by that really does not really augur well for real participation by all in making decisions as they relate to economic development. Dr. Canterbury, can you weigh in on this issue of a national approach to development and how beneficial that is?
Yes, you see, the whole question of social and economic development has to do with human continuity and the way that we continue. The society doesn't stop when one government is out of power and the next one comes in. The society continues. It's the same way that people might be saying, oh, that Mr. Trump is in power. The society isn't going to stop going on. The economy isn't going to stop working. So, but the policies you put in place would be able to impact the perhaps speed or the direction in which the economy may go or the society may go. But one of the things that CY has always made, since in a series on Guyana and the wider world, many years ago, we dealt with this notion of the criminalized state in Guyana. He continued to say, and which he just made, the point he just made here again, that there seems to be a lack of some sort of a nationalism, some sort of a national consciousness, seeing Guyana as a place where you want to develop, as distinct from the elite forces that control political power. So the decision making seems to be in the interests of the ruling cabal and not in the national interests. And this is why you would have the discontinuity in the development approach. So that if you were to have continuity, you cannot just be making these decisions on the economy and society purely within your self-interest, within the self-interest of a political party or within the self-interest of a particular voter group. So we have to consider the fact that the economy and the society, the people who are making decisions over them, must make these decisions in the interests of Guyana, as distinct from making decisions within the interests of their own elitist group and their cronies, which is what we've seen happening in Guyana. And the same problem, I think, we're going to see happening with this oil money. Because already there are accusations that the government is merely spending the money and giving contracts, etc., to its supporters and excluding others from participating in this process. And so even to the way it's going to distribute, we've heard that they distribute the cash transfers that they've been making. They've been making these cash transfers to their own constituents, the people that vote for them, or they use it as a means to buy votes, which we know for a fact that the payout that they're going to make is aimed at buying votes, as distinct from promoting the national interests. So I think it's very important that we should all be able to have continuity in programs and policies as a means of really developing Guyana, as distinct from this focusing on some specific political party.
Dr. Dennis Canterbury. Professor Thomas, I want to read something to you to get your input, because I think it's significant in terms of where those who are in power in government in Guyana, how they're thinking. And this is Attorney General Nandlal making a criticism of the WPA and the AFC as they relate to the production sharing agreement of 2016. Now, before I ask you that question, I want to emphasize something that somebody called me over the weekend and pointed out to me, that the WPA, of all the parties, the WPA had nothing to do with the production sharing agreement. We were part of the government, but we had nothing to do with that production sharing agreement.
That's absolutely true.
And that is absolutely true. So Nandlal cannot point to us. He chastises the AFC for signing, being at the forefront of the signing of the PSA. But here is what he says. Now, here's what the news report said. Nandlal directed appointed critique at the WPA, a party he argued no longer had the political strength or membership to make legitimate calls on national matters. I want to read that again. Nandlal directed appointed critique at the WPA, a party he argued no longer has the political strength or membership to make legitimate calls on national matters. Professor Thomas, Dr. Dennis Canterbury, your comments.
I mean, it's pathetic, but that's what they're reduced to. I mean, they have no tolerance for ideas because they have none themselves. They treat everything as a hustle because that's what they are. They treat everything as people trying to maneuver for positions because that's what they're constantly trying to do. And even within their own party, let me tell you, there are lots of people that support the positions that we take on many matters. And that's what they're afraid of. That the ambition and confidence and the nationalism that many of the youth in the PPP and PPPC are seeking to find, they don't find it there. And they have to turn to deal with the abuse reluctantly that they direct against us. I know that for a fact. Because many of these people are my students. They know we don't talk lies. They share the position we have on many matters. But they also share an environment which I don't have to live within.
Dr. Canterbury, when you heard that, because I know you read the article in question, you drew it to my attention. Here's the Attorney General, one of the leaders of the ruling party, saying a party that doesn't have membership, a large membership, that doesn't have what he calls support, has absolutely no right to speak on national issues.
So it's I wanted to laugh, but this is not a laughable matter. It shows the elitist nature of the people who are ruling. One, he knows the WPA's membership. Are they spying on the WPA to know the membership?
But no, I mean,
I'm coming around.
I mean, the elitist story. I mean, people will say we are elitist too. So, but he's saying even elites of a particular party don't have the right to speak.
Yeah, right. And so, in other words, so if he, when I say that it shows the elitist nature of the PPP, that they want to exclude even to the small people, even the people who they consider to be small. I'm using the elites versus the people up there who running the show versus the small person on the ground, right? So that's the context in which I'm using the elitist nature of them. And then but who are they really to know our membership?
But apart from that, even if they're right that we don't have membership, even if they're right that we do, does that mean that we don't have a right to speak? Here you're talking is the right to participate in the national discussion. That is what they're taking away from us. Forget about whether we get
I know
or so on. Yes.
So this reinforces the point about the elitist nature of these guys. They don't want to hear from people they consider to be small. They don't want to hear from the poor. They don't want to hear from working class people, because they believe that, oh, you don't exist because you're so small, you don't have numbers, so you don't have a right to speak. But everyone has a right to speak. Whether you're a poor person living in a village in the quarantine or in Buxton, or whether you're living in your fancy mansion in what's the name of that place there in Pradoville. Whether you're living in your fancy mansion in Pradoville or you're living in a small village in the Rupununi, you have a right to speak. And therefore, I think he's completely out of order.
I think also, what these guys are doing is trying to establish conditionalities for people who voice opinion in Guyana.
Yes.
The total abuse of any intellectual honesty.
Yes.
Is the criminal way of trying to silence the opposition. If you reduce everybody that speaks against you to the numbers that support you, then you have no room for discourse or contestation of ideas. And what about an academic at the university who might have a very different view from the rulership of the country? Can they express ideas even if it's only on their behalf as a result of their research?
Exactly.
Yes.
So
what is the value in that situation of research? It doesn't matter to them, because what it is propaganda. To them, there's no truth. It's almost a vitiation of the idea that there is some truth that you could find and look for in the sciences and in learning. It's really a repugnant view of scholarship. And they can't tolerate it because, of course, they lack it in the real sense of understanding what scholarship is and about. So they react that way. You don't have numbers. So why are you talking?
Right.
I think, CY and Dennis, that is the larger point here, right? I think they don't mind the working class talking, so long as the working class talk what they want them, the working class to talk, right? And I think the larger point here is not so much class, because they can't look at us in the WP and call us working class. And, we are not working class in that sense. I think it is the idea of the right to offer ideas in the society, the right, if you are not aligned with the PPP, to be able to offer ideas and to discuss ideas in the public space. And we have spent a lifetime fighting for those rights, even when the left wing...
Even under colonialism, we had to fight.
That's right.
We had to fight the governors. We think
even the left wing, which we were part of, who used to refer to certain rights as bourgeois rights. Clive Thomas and the WPA argued these are not bourgeois rights. The right to offer ideas, regardless of how many people put up their hand and say we support you, is a fundamental right that people have given their lives for. And these are not rights that we should take seriously. And what Nandalal is saying there is pointing us backwards rather than pointing us forward. And that is why it must be taken seriously, what he's saying. Professor Clive Thomas, all my lifetime, I've had to deal with blackouts, my generation, and I'm not a small guy. Blackout, we call it load shedding at one time. Power outage, blackout. We are now into the era of the petrol state, and we are still dealing with blackouts, power outages, load shedding, whatever you call it. Please put for us, Professor Thomas, this problem of this constant, continuous blackout. Please put it in its larger perspective as it relates to the country, the economy of the country, the political economy of the country.
Well, I was trying to avoid starting that discussion because it's a long one.
Yes, I know, but we will come back.
Next week we'll come back at a time. But I feel that some decisions, like for example, in regard to electricity, in regard to GCOM itself, and the issue of biometrics and so forth, sugar, the use of the oil and gas, the universal basic income, that some of these decisions are wider and more requiring a form of governance that we've never had in Guyana and going forward. They can't be solved by individual governments. The country is too small. Our resources of human resources in particular, too limited for us to be able to solve all these problems on our own. So we have to reach out to the diaspora, to other associated institutions, and try to find a means of governance in which we can bring all our talents together and treat them as collective endeavors of society. I think unless we use that approach, we run into the same problem the electricity has had since my youth, as long as I live in Guyana. Finding a solution where you stumble from one project to another, and no substantial improvement takes place in the delivery of energy to the country. We talk about alternative forms of energy. There's no framework for bringing that into existence. I sat as a member of a committee when the last government was in power for 2 years, and under the resources provided by the CDB and the IADB, we were working on long-term plans for sustainable energy in Guyana. I thought some excellent work was being done, both by the people who were running it then, some of them hangouts from the PPP former government, and some of the new people from the new government. And so I feel the model in which we should use to ensure that we come out with some long-term plan for the development of electricity and its distribution within the country and not leave it to any one government, which means that every government will therefore have its part to play in providing the continuity needed to effect that transition. And I don't think we can do that outside of a formal agreement on what governance is going to be like in Guyana going forward. And I think that will be dictated largely by our size and the scale of the things that we have to do. I just identify a couple there: GCOM, oil, sugar. These are things that require multi-generational, in terms of political parties governing, multi-generational efforts.
Dr. Canterbury?
Yes, I think that I wholeheartedly support what CY just said about the requiring multi-generational efforts to address such big issues for a small country such as ours in Guyana. And but one of the things that was fascinating to me is the persistence of this problem of blackouts in Guyana and attempts to solve it, and again requiring multi-generational attempts or efforts at resolving it, rather than doing that, employing this sort of individualist approach in terms of government to one government is doing one thing and the other government is doing something else in terms of addressing this problem. And here I say this because when I look at the this power ship that they want to bring in, and they have some contract for it, when I look at some of the data on this power ship arrangement, it's called the car power ship. They're really a part of a company called Karidens, which is
Turkish.
a Turkish company. But then this company has been embroiled with scandals in several countries. It has been exposed for major corruption. It has been exposed for threatening civil society, has been exposed for submitting false or faulty impact assessments. Some of the countries they've been involved with all these issues are in Lebanon, in Pakistan, in South Africa, in Mozambique. In fact, the situation in Lebanon was so outrageous in terms of the rates they were charging that the World Bank did a study and found that it was better for Lebanon to just build its own power supply permanently on land rather than taking the power from them, from this company, because they were actually charging them when they finished paying over the period of time. They paid way more than they would have paid to build their own power plant. So let me go to bring these companies in. I don't know how much due diligence is done on them, but certainly it raises a question of corruption because they're well known for paying off local commissioners so as to get contracts. They're well known for paying off environmental assessment, the people who conduct environmental impact assessments, because this was the struggle in Mozambique with them, because they were locating just outside of Maputo. And then, but the people were saying, no, you can't do that because the pollution is going to be coming in from this to the land, to the capital. But they had already made their paid off, or whoever they bought off. The same thing in South Africa that happened there with this company. So I think we really need continuity in terms of the way we approach these issues, as CY is saying, including things like electoral reform, including the question of sugar. I'm not sure what they have done with the monies they took from the World Bank. They collected $16.5 billion as a syndicated loan from this is what the National Industrial Commercial and Investment Limited, NICIL, secured with interest rate of 4.75%. But then we don't know what's the status of that. And that money was taken specifically to reform the industry since they got into power. But what's going on with that money and the reform of the industry? Now they're reporting all of this losses. So the reform brought the losses?
Dr. Thomas.
What I think we should do, I don't like to make suggestions publicly, but maybe our next presser should focus on some of the things that Dennis mentioned about the power ship itself, so that we at least can ventilate them.
Right. And that's what I was coming to ask you.
Because
how important those statistics that Dennis has raised.
I follow the comments which you have to get online from by Unstable News about it. And there are many comments, maybe 40, 50, which we don't see ever unless you go online. And most of them show deep skepticism. Most of them, I think, come from engineers who would know each other. So like a club talking to each other. And most of them are highly skeptical of what is being said. Some of them might be within the government so they can speak more freely. But none of them had confidence in the car power ship.
Professor,
so I think the stuff that you've given us, Dennis, if we could jot it down and try and get it in the press but for next week.
Yes.
I think would make a very useful story.
Right.
Because I didn't get to pursue any due diligence on the form itself, although I knew I'd have to do that before I go for it.
Professor Clive Thomas there, and Dr. Dennis Canterbury, dealing with a range of issues as they relate to our economy going forward. We want to thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Canterbury, for coming on to our Open Word edition, Wednesday night edition of Politics 101. And I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you
Could
very
you
much.
send me a tape of your stuff? Did you mention in it? A
Right.
snippet? Or you don't have the tape, David? The
Yes.
snippets of what he did.
Right. We'll send that to you.
That's the bit that he said there.
Right.
Save him having to retype it.
Right. Right. Professor Clive Thomas and Dennis Canterbury there are executive members of the WPA. And as we keep saying here, if you are trying to stop us from speaking, we're not going to stop. No, I will not still my voice, says Martin Carter. I have too much to claim. So if you see me looking at your hands or listening when you speak, know that I look for fire. I've learned from books, dear friend, of men who could not sleep to dream, but dream to change the world, of men who could not die since death was far too poor, of men who hungered without a light. And so if you see me looking at your hands or listening when you speak, know that I do not sleep to dream, but I dream to change the world. And that's what we do. We want to change Guyana, and we want to change the world for the better. For the better. Politics for us is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. We have an objective. If we ask you for your vote, it is not to make us big. If we ask you for your vote, it is to facilitate us having a seat at the table to put our policy proposals into action. We have pointed out a gap, a very serious gap, that you cannot talk about developing your country, about helping your people to rise above their circumstances, their poverty, and exclude an important segment. Every one of us knows a teenage parent. Every one of us. They're there in our families. They're there in our communities, in the streets we live. And even if we are removed from that reality, those of us who do research, they're there in the statistics. They are there, and they must not be left out. WPA is saying it's not too late for them to find a way to include those young people in this little meager handout that they're given. For us, it is the principle of inclusion that matters, not the principle of exclusion. And so we say, open up our minds and open our voices. Even this government, as hard as and don't care as they are, they will be forced to respond to our voices. They have done so even without saying they're doing so. And we have to continue to raise our voices, to walk the pavements, and as they say, the byways, and to reach our people and to say to them, together, we are not going to allow them to cheat us, to cheat you, the people of this country. Without you, there is no country. Without you, there is no country. I'm going to see you all tomorrow night for another edition of Politics 101.
One race from the same place that make the same grip on the same ship. So we must push one common intention. It's for a better life in the region for we woman and we children. That must be the ambition.